Hey guys, it's Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films, back again with Doctor Who Classic. Last time around, we had the Mask of Mandragora.
That's right.
That's it. What was that one about?
That's actually one of my favorites in the Tom Baker era. They land in the late 1400s or 15th century in Renaissance Italy, and there is this cult of the Mandragora, which turns out to be not what we thought, the Mandrake root or anything like that, but there's some kind of Mandragora energy from another dimension or another universe. Something anyway, unfortunately makes its way to this universe and starts possessing people. I never did remember what the Mandragora energy was out to do.
They said they wanted to destroy humans before they gained dominance in the galaxy.
Oh, okay.
So stop them at an early point.
But there's lots of really great costumes and sets, outdoor shots. Really did look like Renaissance Italy, and not like Southern England for a change. And I even speculated that the Prince Giuliano, I think, would have made an interesting companion.
Yeah, definitely. And it would also been interesting because, I mean, I know that the whole thing with doing a sort of historical companion nowadays, I think the argument is, well, you'd have to explain so many things to them. But having watched classic Doctor Who, it's like, well, you didn't really have to do that with Jamie.
Yeah, he adapted pretty quickly.
He just sort of accepted things, you know? And if there was some sort of crazy, sciencey alien mumbo-jumbo that they were talking about, he just said, well, I'll just deal with it as it comes to me, basically, you know? He just didn't put much bother in it. So
the thing I really liked about Giuliano is that, like the Da Vinci's and the Galileos and some of the artists of that time, he was also a budding scientist. And here's the guy who says, I understand what we've been taught for the last 1,500 years, but there's more out there. And there's that idea of that inquiring mind wants to know would have made kind of an interesting idea for him to come along and see what other places were like.
Yeah, so they definitely need to try that again, because pretty much in all of modern Doctor Who, they haven't had a historical type companion. Yeah. They almost did one time, but then they killed her off in favor of a modern version of her. So, yeah. And everybody universally said that the Victorian version of that character was way more interesting than the modern version. Yeah. But anyway, we are on to the Hand of Fear today.
Okay.
Which is one of those generic titles, but that's in a good way of like, well, it could mean anything, rather than sometimes you get one and it's like, I don't know exactly what this means, and then you watch it and it's like, I don't know if that's what you meant with that title. So
yeah, the mask of Mandragora, the actual mask, the dance for all of the assorted heads of state who were coming to Giuliano's kingdom, was a minor thing. I was thinking this morning that maybe it should have been called the Cult of Mandragora, or the Mandragora Curse or something. Anyway, it's just that this is one of our most common criticisms in old Who, in classic Who, is that the titles, it literally seems like you said, somebody says, here's the title, go write the 4 stories. And
I kind of get with the mask, it's like, okay, well, it's sort of a play on the fact that all the cultists wear a mask. But the mask itself wasn't actually important. If it was that, like, oh, yes, well, you have this special mask that connects you to the Mandragora, and, you do this, and then you do that sort of play on words with the actual mask that happens later, all right. But other than that, you just sort of a minor play on words. And also, for our biggest criticism of Classic Who, this doesn't matter, like, at all. If our biggest problem is the titles aren't great sometimes, it's, we're doing pretty fine then. So, but it is still a bit of a complaint. Only sometimes, So, but yeah. Also, next week, I do believe we have The Deadly Assassin.
Oh.
So we'll be rewatching that episode. And I know when we used to, at least a couple times when we did a rewatch, we would do sort of a Q&A from stuff on Twitter. And I think now is probably a better time to do that. Because people did ask if we were going to do that for Genesis of the Daleks, and I held it off, probably just because I was lazy or time or whatever. But now it might actually be better to do it now, because we're further into this era. So I also some people have suggested that, you know how when we finish a Doctor, we go through and we do a quick review of all of their stories, and people have said that might be a bit too difficult with Tom Baker. So I can't remember what episode it was. I'd have to go back and check the comments, but someone said about halfway through this era, there's a bit of a change, and it becomes, it starts to become a lot more different. So yeah, maybe we could split that up. Okay. Do half of the reviews at the halfway point, then do the rest, or not, or we can just do all of them in one big go in a big 5-hour episode of Doctor Who. But anyway, but we'll get to that when we get to that.
Now, the Deadly Assassin, doesn't he go back to Gallifrey on that one?
Yes,
it's one of the first times where most of it is set on Gallifrey. I remember in the Three Doctors, they were trying to the Time Lords were a part of that script, but it wasn't the main part.
Yeah.
Because they were working with Omega.
Yeah.
Okay. Who was in a pocket universe or something. Anyway, so this will be the first time we really get to see Gallifrey itself as the setting for the entire 4-part episode.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, before that, we do have the Hand of Fear to get to today. And it's 4 parts, so we'll do it all in one go. So, why don't we just jump right into it?
Computations indicate that at 19 spans, there is still a 1 in 3 million chance of particle survival. We have no choice, Aston.
Alright, so they've just executed some criminal
Well,
who was trying to break down the galactic barriers.
meanwhile, in England.
Oh, a quarry. How unique.
I mean, I guess we haven't had a quarry in a little while. Oh, no.
Get out of the way! No, Mike! Mike! No!
Maybe he knows South Croydon, man. Does he look as if he comes from South
Simon!
Croydon?
Run, Doctor!
Holy moly. That was a real detonation.
Yep.
Doctor, please!
Luckily, it made this nice little room for her. Enough for that guy.
Does that crystalline lattice remind you of anything?
It's geodetic, that's about all. As I say, what
looks
you
very
need
familiar.
is a geologist or a geologist.
It's silicon-based.
What the devil do you think? Miss Smith, you feeling better?
Eldred must live.
Aw. Poor guy.
Only one guy at the gate.
Well, I mean, budget cuts and everything. You don't want to fund a nuclear reactor.
So where is everybody? This gigantic nuclear complex seems to have no people other than a couple of guards out front.
Eh.
This is not an exercise. Repeat, this is not.
Keeping it in a Tupperware box. It does look like Cousin Thing. Well, that was scary.
Yeah.
Excellent green screen work there.
Well, alright. England. Fabulous place. But we've had some words about it in the past couple episodes. Something about this feels different. It's not the countryside, I think. This feels like a Third Doctor episode. And that's nice.
Yeah. Now, this is either very obviously they're doing the exteriors at an actual nuclear power plant, which is entirely possible, or it is some kind of industrial complex that has the big cooling towers. So, even for those people who knew a little bit about nuclear power back in the 70s, this would have been very convincing to them.
Yeah. So,
And although it started with lots of sunshine out in the quarry, you'll notice by the time they got there, it had been raining and dreary. So
yeah, it definitely reminds me of earlier Pertwee episodes when they were just, you got to go driving around and you got to go do this thing on this giant industrial complex, and there's some sort of alien or something, or the master, or who knows,
or the boss. Didn't they go to one where there was the computer was the boss?
Yeah. So it's just, I don't know. There's something about it. It's just, now it's nostalgic to go to these places.
Was that the Green Death?
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah, that was the Green Death.
Yeah.
So
roll the credits here. I want to see who Dr. Carter is. He looks very familiar. Rex Robinson. No. The name doesn't sound familiar, but he looks very familiar.
Well, and it's interesting just because of how this episode started, of just these cloaked, very cold people passing this sentence on Eldrad, and then just cut to typical quarry and typical, industrial side. Even though I like it, it's still a very, classic Doctor Who setting.
Yeah.
So,
now, one thing again just brought back memories. On the ice station where they were, the guy who went over to the geodesic dome to scrape the frost off the window, the very first house we lived in England, a little town called Herringswell, obviously had no central heat or air conditioning for the summer or anything like that. So we had kerosene heaters as well as firewood for all of the fireplaces. But no matter how warm we tried to keep it in the house, in the wintertime, every window in the house had frost on the inside.
Yeah.
So that's just a flashback for me.
Yeah. That plus the sort of off-brand reverse Ghost of Christmas Future look that guy's got going on. So
that was kind of interesting, though, because you never saw their faces.
Yeah.
They were obviously humanoid, but, it was, again, intriguing because we didn't find out who they were. All we knew is that they were literally at the edge of the galaxy next to the barrier between galaxies, and that the idea was they had to let Eldrad get as close to the barrier as possible before killing him, because if they didn't, then some part of him might survive, which obviously it has.
Yeah.
And it somehow floated through space, because we're obviously nowhere near the galaxy barrier. I mean, we're not even in the outer rim, really. I wouldn't think we're close to the middle part of the Milky Way. But anyway, interesting that this piece of him manages to float through space, finally, ultimately coming down to Earth, where it is buried, for 150 million years.
Yeah. So, and it's also interesting with that species, whoever they were, because you just don't know what they look like. Do they normally look like that, or is this some sort of crazy winter gear to keep them warm? And I guess sort of their hands did kind of look like his revived hand there, so I would assume they're of the same species. So
an emergency exists in the neutron fission reactor in sector 4. Now,
is there a fly on his forehead?
No, that's a mole, I think.
Some suicidal
I don't know. Looked like it.
A young woman
Looked like it was moving.
The complex and has locked herself
Yeah,
in the
you're right.
outer chamber of the reactor core.
Now, there's two ways they could have done that. First is the green screen of the arm. The other one, though, is having someone whose hand is coming up out of the floor and is doing that.
Well,
Eldrad must live. What? It is the law. There must be no interference with the design. Eldrad must live!
oh, I liked him. Granted, Sarah's in the middle of a nuclear reactor and she's fine, so maybe he's okay too.
Yeah.
Used to absorb radiation the same way as we do oxygen.
So this is a living thing?
Living? It's not only living, it's regenerating.
But if your hypothesis is correct...
Reactor monitor operating, sir.
Yeah, that's a moving hand.
That's incredible.
Boy, I'm glad there's proof and, like, they believe us. That's always so nice.
Well, we gotta put in something more secure than Tupperware.
Nah, man. It's the greatest thing to get away from radiation. Tupperware. They knew what they were doing.
Be sure to burp it.
Careful. That's not as harmless as it looks.
What happened to the ring you used on Carter?
Wow.
I want you to concentrate.
Oh, no, that's not fair. Not again.
Now, Sarah, Eldred, tell me about
How do you
Eldred.
keep from laughing at that face? For once, they're actually following all protocols.
Yeah.
This is not an exercise. Evacuate the complex immediately.
First time we've seen a cliffhanger not on the Doctor or one of his companions, I think.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Well, it's a shame about Dr. Carter, because he was interesting. But, Professor Watson is also a good stand-in, too.
Yeah.
So, honestly, very, very interesting story.
It's very fast-paced. There's no lag to it at all.
Yeah.
No padding.
Yeah. And it is one of those things, though, and I'm sure we'll probably get in the next 2 episodes. I'm just sort of curious, what is Eldrad? Like, are we going to get more of him? Are we going to get more, like, backstory on him? We might not, honestly. It might just be like, well, we saw what we saw at the beginning, and just don't let this guy come back. And then it'd be fine if it was just that, but I don't know.
But that would certainly set up a future episode somewhere down the line where we did get the backstory.
Yeah.
Fight fire with fire. I'm going to call in the armed forces. Destroy that thing before it causes any more harm.
Well, it's our only chance.
Somehow I can't see throwing missiles against that working.
Look, the RAF can only work once.
Air Command have ordered a tactical nuclear strike to take this place out.
Take it
Jeez.
out.
Yeah, level it.
By the way, is it a good idea to use a nuke on a guy that absorbs nuclear radiation?
Any being that can exist, let alone thrive, inside a nuclear pile is hardly likely to be deterred by a few primitive missiles.
But they're the most powerful missiles we have.
Well, good job. You fed the thing. Whoa.
They shall fail, as the obliteration has failed. Strange form or not, Eldrad lives, and shall again rule Castria!
Well, I wasn't expecting that, but it's a pretty decent costume.
Yeah.
As a Time Lord, you are pledged to uphold the laws of time and to prevent alien aggression.
Only when such aggression is deemed to threaten the indigenous population. I think that's how it goes.
Castria was a cold, inhospitable planet, ravaged by the solar winds. I built the spatial barriers to keep out those winds. I devised a crystalline silicone form for our physical needs. 2 alien planets made war later, and Castria became their battleground. They destroyed my barriers. The winds came again to dehydrate the planet. The alien invaders made puppets of the Castrian leaders. I was discredited and sentenced to obliteration. Help me! Take me back through time!
That would contravene the first law of time, a distortion of history. I can't do that.
You cannot refuse.
I'm not refusing, Eldred. I'll take you back. But it must be in the present time.
No, Eldred, leave him!
I mean, what did you think would happen? Why do you just have a gun here, by the way?
I have come to claim my kingdom. Come. We will descend to the thermal chambers.
What? Alright. Didn't expect a trap at the end there.
Well, that took a very interesting turn.
Yeah.
Because, you know, even with some of the other aliens that we've seen, you know, the Zygons and the Sontarans and everything, she is probably the most sophisticated of the aliens that we've seen since the Draconians. And again, very similar kind of elongated head.
Yeah.
And a very interesting voice. She has a very deep voice for a female.
This honestly feels like a villain on Star Trek, you know? Like, this is one of those interesting things where it's like, well, they're kind of doing some bad things, but, you know, it's for the good of their people, and, you know, Captain Picard might have to do some diplomacy, and they'll figure something out, warp core engines or something or other, some sort of technobabble, but yeah, it's really interesting that our sort of villain of the episode, well, now has a physical body, and then pretty much isn't our villain. And especially there, like, I'm waiting for the turn, like, yes, I will, you know, revive my planet and then genocide or something. Like, I'm expecting some sort of turn, and instead she opened a door and got shot with something. So yeah, it's really interesting. And honestly, this is one of those, again, where it's like, you could do like 2 more episodes. We got 1 more episode of this, and it's like, you could have gone for 2, you know?
Yeah.
If you had gone for 6 and really expand, because if you're going to have 2 sort of plot lines like that, then yeah, expand that to 6. So.
Intruders penetrating level 150 and descending.
Oh man, it's tough to stare at that.
You're made of stone, you crumble to sand. We're walking on them.
Oh, the pattern changed.
Wait a minute.
What's it now?
Who were they set for?
Presumably the aliens that Eldad told us about, the people who invaded the planet.
Well, that means that they're silicon-based life forms.
Yes. And they're very rare. And it's something of a coincidence that there are 2 of them in the same galaxy.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, are they getting at, like, maybe there were no aliens? Ah, yes, the most cumbersome way of picking up a person. It's not that far. She could probably jump it.
Interesting that she can stay boarded like that, planked.
Well, it's like watching an Atari on acid.
Doctor? Sarah? It is I, Eldrad.
Eldrad?
Of course, you don't recognize me.
Well, this species is nuts.
How do we know you're Eldrad?
Why she he?
I had to assume a form that would be acceptable to the primitives of your planet.
Eh.
And so you modeled yourself on the first primitive you came in contact. He modeled himself on you.
Thanks.
You think you have victory within your grasp, but I, Rokon, tell you have won nothing but defeat. So, Rokon, you still live.
After 150 million
The
years.
so-called King of Castria. It was he who ordered my obliteration. Me, Eldrad, architect of the barriers. They thought they could destroy me, so I destroyed the barriers.
Why should Rokon want to destroy you in the first place?
Because he knew I would take his place. I was young and strong. He was weak and old. He wasn't fit to rule Castria. And he had no appetite for conquest.
But you do.
Yes, I wanted Castrians to be masters of the galaxy. Now, Doctor, I have an audience with my King. King?
Well,
We've been taken for a ride.
maybe you can call the Mandragora. Maybe they'll help.
Why do I suspect Rokon was a hologram or something?
Oh, maybe.
And he's just
it's just a pre-recorded message.
Your successor?
Aw.
What is this? You traitor, you've cheated me of my revenge!
Oh, there's just nobody on this planet.
The Castrian race chose final oblivion. And because they feared you might return to wage eternal war throughout the galaxy, they elected also to destroy the race bank. Traitor! I gave their lives!
That's quite the decision for a race of people to make.
Eldred, king of nothing.
Wow.
This.
Oh no, a clothesline. Good job.
Well, the gravity of the law finally caught up with him.
Yeah, that's all very well, but that was a bit rash. I'm sick of being cold and wet and hypnotized left, right, and center. I'm sick of being shot at, savaged by bug-eyed monsters, never knowing if I'm coming or going or being. I'm going to pack my goodies, and I am going home.
Oh no. Now he's being attacked by Atari.
Call from Gallifrey. Gallifrey. After all this time. Gallifrey.
He's saying Gallifrey, not
I can't
Gallifrey.
take Sarah to Gallifrey. So I can't take you with me. You've got to go.
Oh, come on. I can't miss Gallifrey. Look, I was only joking. I didn't mean it.
That's a very 70s outfit.
Don't forget me.
Sarah. Don't you forget me.
Bye, Doctor. You know, travel does broaden the mind.
Yes. Till we meet again, Sarah.
This isn't Hillview Road. I bet it isn't even South Croydon. Hey, you! He blew it!
Alrighty.
So is that the end of Sarah?
Yep.
Oh.
I suddenly remembered at the beginning of this episode that Sarah's not in The Deadly Assassin, and I remember we questioned that because he doesn't have a companion in that episode, and people said, well, he just dropped off Sarah because he can't take her to Gallifrey, and don't worry, they'll meet again when he rolls around to the 10th Doctor. Although there is also there is a failed spin-off for Sarah Jane during the classic Doctor Who era called K9 and Company, and I've reacted to it, and a lot of people say it is hot garbage. It's not bad.
How many episodes?
Just the one.
Oh, just one.
They only made a pilot episode, and it's okay. It's basically Sarah Jane and K9 going after some cult in the middle of England. So I thought it was interesting enough. So maybe we'll watch that sometime. I guess we should probably get to K9 before we do that, though. Anywho, But that is the Hand of Fear.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Again, the female version of, what was his name? Her name? Eldrad was very interesting.
Yeah.
Very subtle. Then, unfortunately, when switched over to the male version, was, the standard, this is my planet and everything, and tricked very easily. I don't think the female version would have been tricked that easily.
Yeah.
But, again, very Twilight Zone-ish ending there, where he's finally taken back to rule over his kingdom, and there's literally nothing left.
Yeah.
Now, the doctor says he may not have died. After all, he is made of stone, etc., etc. He fell down the abyss. Probably would have been injured. May have taken, centuries or millennia to ultimately get back in shape. The doctor did toss the ring in after him, so...
Yeah.
Theoretically, he didn't die, but he will be trapped on Castria for a very long time.
Yeah, definitely. Because, who knows how much of that technology still works. It does to an extent, because the regenerator still worked. But yeah, a very interesting thing of just this entire race was like, nope, this dude sucks. We cannot live at all, and we cannot have anything. We must completely die out because that guy could come back. Because there's a 1 in 3 million chance he could come back. So yeah, it's a very interesting story, and that's all based on the other part of the story, which was the nuclear reactor, which was really good. So yeah, just a really solid story overall. So yeah, we had the explosion at the quarry, which thankfully completely missed Sarah and just sort of made a little hole around her.
Well, now, as weird as that seems, that has happened even recently. We know both from the Murrah building bombing here in Oklahoma City and in the Trade Center, there were pockets where people survived. It's impossible to believe that the 9 stories of the Murrah building could have come down and anybody would survive that. But it's all just literally just a 1,000,000,000-to-1 accident where 2 pieces of stone come together and create a pocket where, although they were injured, there were people who were there, still had oxygen, and ultimately were pulled out.
Yeah.
Fascinating that they came down in the middle of that and heard the sirens and yet didn't react to it.
It took them a little while to realize what the sirens were.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, it was the sirens and seeing the guy, waving his arms, and then Sarah finally put it together.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we had the Hand of Fear, which I guess, again, very sort of generic title. There was a hand, which is more than a bit more we can say than the mask. So there's at least that. But yeah, the hand that possessed Sarah and then also possessed Dr. Carter did not possess. When they went by and hit those 3 guards or whatever, it didn't then possess them, which is interesting. They just sort of dropped that.
And then it did momentarily possess the guy who rescued the hand and the ring, but then we never saw him again, did we?
Well, 'cause he went into the core of the reactor, so his body was vaporized. So, but yeah, it is kind of a shame though that the Dr. Carter ended up dying so quickly, because I thought he was a very interesting character. Yeah. But at the same time, we did have Professor Watson at the nuclear reactor, and I thought he was also interesting.
Yeah, and not the standard, I don't believe anything you say, is pretty much as the within 2 or 3 minutes, the doctor explained what was going on. He was going, all right, you seem to know what you're saying, and I will believe you on it, which was nice for a change.
Yeah, because we also, and especially maybe because recently we had the Seeds of Doom, and I know that was the whole point of Dr. Chase, was that he's this mad plant guy and he just wants all this interesting pod and stuff. But when the doctor's talking about this alien plant that devours everything, he's just like, oh well, good, the humans suck anyway, it'll decrease the surplus population, So obscure,
but wonderful Charles Dickens reference there.
Yeah. So, but yeah, with Professor Watson, it was interesting, even though it was still very far out and he was having trouble believing it. But then, 3 seconds later, he sees a moving hand on the monitor. So it's like, well, I guess you are telling the truth. So that was really nice to have, someone on our side. We weren't arrested.
Yeah.
That was nice. I can't tell you how tired I am of watching Tom Baker getting arrested.
Yeah.
So, which was always the nice thing with Pertwee, was that because he always could walk in and just, say, well, I'm here with you, and he generally would have the Brigadier or someone with him. So it would be like, yeah, that wouldn't happen too often. So yeah, that was interesting. And then we had the Ring and Driscoll. And one of the other guy that was there in the decontamination, he looked kind of familiar, but I can't really place, like... It may just because he kind of looks like someone from Game of Thrones, and I've been rewatching a lot of those clips. So, and I think that actor does show up in classic Doctor Who at some point, but I don't know if it's this or if it's another episode. So, oh well. If there is a person who is someone from another thing, they will definitely tell us in the comments. Yeah. So, but yeah. And then we had the unexplosion of the reactor core, which was interesting, and Eldrad just absorbing it all in really quickly. The only thing with that, and this is just a minor technical thing, is that they say that she absorbs the missiles before they can do any damage. The missiles, wouldn't there still have had to have been like a hole going through where the missiles came in before it hit her?
Yeah.
So, like, I understand, like, oh, that's why, this place wasn't destroyed, but there should also be a giant missile-sized hole in, like, 3 different layers of wall. But oh well, it's not important. So, and I guess, hey, the RAF tried. And most of the time, they're not even allowed to try. So, at least they tried, it just didn't work. So, there's only so many times, It's like lightning in a bottle with the RAF. They only work sometimes. So, but yeah, that was all very interesting. And then getting the new body of Eldrad, and it definitely much better than the second body that he got.
Yeah.
So
now again, great special effect with the melting of the door, and then the female version of Eldrad stepping through it. Again, that particular costume, that particular special effect of her was very intriguing because, as they later said, it was meant to mollify the primitives, the Earth people, because if he had appeared in his male form, he would have been aggressive looking and they would have tried to shoot him. But she, even with her very deep voice, which was again a nice touch, she was able to essentially get the Doctor and Sarah on her side, get back to Castria, and then change into the slobbering villain that he was.
Yeah. And that was also interesting too, pretty much using the Doctor being a Time Lord against him, basically. But I like that. It's like, well, you're supposed to help these species and stuff. Although she was really banking on the fact that the Doctor is the Doctor, because any other Time Lord, well, they wouldn't even be here. Like, that's the thing. It's like, oh, you're supposed to help, people and civilizations, and you should help me get back to my planet and stuff. And it's like, yeah, but the Time Lords don't do anything. He does, but he's the sort of outcast of the Time Lords for doing that. So you lucked out, kind of. You lucked out on the fact that he did take you back to Castria, and you also didn't luck out on the fact that he's the Doctor and he can stop pretty much any sort of alien force in the universe. So, even ones where, it seems, oh, they're almost like gods, they are too powerful even for Time Lords, he still finds a way.
Yeah. Now, again, that last scene, again, rather than drop him down to the bottom of the abyss, to me, a more effective visual where he goes into the chamber where the race crystals had been, and Rokan slams the door behind him and says, we have built this chamber so that no one can escape from it. And that way he would literally be trapped inside, literally not just even a purgatorio, but a literal hell. This is what you wanted, and now we have given it to you, and now you have till the end of time to realize just what an idiot you were, and how we supposedly stupid people have tricked you into this.
Yeah, that would have been good. I was also thinking you just get across the log and then you just push it into the abyss, and you're just trapped there. I mean, look at that body. You think he can jump? Probably not. So, your ending is way more poetic. Mine is goofier. Either way, they do work on Doctor Who. So they could have gone either way, but still works the way they did it. Honestly, a very similar ending to... Actually, everything about Eldrad is kind of similar to Morbius, where it's like, this sort of great... you come to find out later with Eldrad, this evil that is being reborn and gaining this new body, and you kind of wish it didn't stick with the body because it was kind of, big and clunky, but whatever. And then it eventually being defeated and falling off a cliff. Although... apparently Morbius died and Eldrad didn't, so but yeah.
And one thing, and again this is just a minor thing, when he did fall into the abyss, I would think by the mid-70s they would have had an opportunity to green screen him, not just falling flat on his back pulling the camera away from him, but to have a stuntman in that suit literally tumbling, so that he really does look like he's, like the Emperor in Star Wars when he gets thrown down the shaft. You see him struggling and falling away and bouncing off of stuff. So,
yeah.
But again, these are minor quibbles. I really, really, truly enjoyed this entire series. All 4 of the episodes were well written, well done, and kind of a surprise and somewhat poignant there, where he says, "I can't take you any further," because there was no lead up to this. I mean, in previous companions who wanted to go, they've made it pretty clear, for several episodes that this I'm kind of getting tired of this, and maybe I want to go home. And she just at the very last said, this is getting ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so she was basically saying, hey, you got to treat me better or I'm leaving. And then when she does have to leave, she goes, oh, I was kind of only joking. I really kind of would like to stay. And he says, I'm sorry, but I can't.
Yeah. I mean, I get the feeling it's just one of those things they kind of go through every week, they just don't show it on the show. It's like, sometimes she gets mad and stuff, but they, then he takes her to a new planet and everything's fine. It's just, this is the one time where it's like, because I don't think he would have actually taken her back if he didn't have to.
Yeah.
So it was just that, I can't take you to Gallifrey, so that just has to be it. And yeah, this is sort of the first time where it's like, they don't leave on their own or just die, basically. It's that, no, I can't take you anymore. Yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting ending, and also just the fact that it's mid-season as well. Like, I don't know if there was something with like production that was like, maybe this was maybe they made these 2 episodes with the end of season 13 or not, but although that is very sort of first Doctor, second Doctor, where it's just like in the middle it's just a new companion in the middle of the season. Yeah. So but yeah, I have a vague idea about who the next companion is, but I mean, they're not in the Deadly Assassin, so it'll be a little bit before we get to the next one, but yeah. And we learned everything about Eldrad and Castria, that it wasn't these that Castria became this battleground. It's that after creating the barriers to keep the planet all nice and warm, from solar winds, which were somehow cold. I'm not sure how that works, but whatever, it's fine. But after doing that, Castria, or Eldrad, wanted to conquer the rest of the galaxy. Just cause, I guess. It's like, we have all this technological achievement that I created, so let's go conquer everybody else, It is one of those things where it's like, again, what we said last episode, where it's like, well, why doesn't the Mandragora, why are they going to humans? Like, I get, yeah, the humans will create this, sort of space force, not in those words, but create this sort of force in space that will go and spread throughout the galaxy, but they're not really conquerors. They're not, I suppose, yes, it's a threat to, if you're the one who's trying to have dominion over everything, that's sort of a threat. But why doesn't the Mandragora go to, like, the Daleks or the Cybermen or, other, more aggressive species? And then, yeah, it's like, why don't they deal with Eldrad, Or I guess, the people of Castria already had that on lockdown in trying to execute her. But yeah, it just seems like a strange thing, but it's a minor point of last episode. But that was all interesting. And then yeah, just the whole thing of the King of Nothing, which was really interesting. And yeah, this entire species made this decision to die off. And it's not like, oh, well, we have these other contingencies, or they left, or something else, or it's like, no, they just decided to die, just on the off chance this guy ever came back.
Well, again, though, that philosophically speaking, that's a very interesting take, where they basically said, hey, we had advanced scientific capabilities. We were a primarily peaceful planet, but we somehow ended up creating this guy, and if we can do that, who's to say that we can't do it again, that it won't happen again? So we must first of all obliterate him, and then, making the incredible decision, we must essentially allow our race to die out so that we would never be a threat to anybody else. That's just some next level philosophy there.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, it's sort of the opposite of the story with Thanos in the Avengers, where he wanted to, I guess, like creating the barriers, he wanted to help his people, but his actions were just too drastic, and eventually he was right. All of his people died out because they didn't do anything. And here it's reverse, is that Eldrad wants to go and conquer with all these technological achievements, and they're like, no, we need to do the right thing and just completely die out, because we can't be that sort of threat. So yeah, it's a very interesting idea, definitely. And I don't know, it is one of those things too where it's like, they sort of leave the door open for bringing Eldrad back someday, and I'm gonna go ahead and say they probably didn't, but on the other hand, it's like, well, you could also just sort of leave that as a poetic ending of just, nope, it's just the King of Nothing. Even if he does climb out of that abyss someday, there's nothing he can do. Yeah. So, and eventually he just spends however thousands, millions of years it takes to die, and that's just the end of his story. So yeah, it's a very, very interesting story. And the fact that was also sort of, I don't want to say tacked on, but sort of on top of this whole interesting nuclear reactor story that we got. So yeah, if you want a good example of how to do two stories as one story, I think this was a good one. Because again, Seeds of Doom, while still being a good episode, the first part of that is Antarctica, and that was interesting, and that was cool and stuff. And then you completely shift. You got some characters carrying over, Scorby and Keeler and everything, but then it moves to, well, here's England at Chase's mansion and stuff, and now the evil plants, and he's crazy and stuff like that. And it's like, and that's fine, but you also had something really interesting in Antarctica, and you could have made something work. And so this is a good example of that. Or even as they were going through Castria with the first form of Eldrad, I was kind of reminded a bit of Pyramids of Mars, where it's like, all right, well, now we're in this new location, we're trying to get through this place to get to do this thing. And Pyramids of Mars did that as well, but when it actually got to the pyramid, it was incredibly boring and nothing was really happening. So yeah, like this, I feel like did that a little bit better, and the rest of that story is good too. And Sutek is an interesting villain as well. But yeah, I think this like did that just so perfectly.
Yeah.
So yeah, really, really good stuff. You got anything else?
I got nothing.
All right. Well, we already know what's coming up next. Next week, we are back rewatching The Deadly Assassin, now in context, which is always good. So, if I remember right, we're going to go to Gallifrey. Obviously, there's an assassin. Somebody dies. There's something about the Matrix. I think the Doctor is getting drowned at some point. And also, if I remember correctly, this is the return of the Master.
Yes.
Yeah, the GUI Master.
The GUI Master.
Yeah, so...
and the Doctor runs for president or something?
I don't... He might, yeah. That might be... I think that's like how he gets out of being executed by the Time Lords or something.
Boy, possible criminal running for political office to keep out of trouble. Where have we heard that recently?
That is a very interesting idea. I don't know. But yeah, so we'll get back to that next week, and it's 4 parts, so we'll do all 4 in one go. And then we're pretty much... We don't have a rewatch until season 19, when we're back around to Kinda and the 5th Doctor. So...
Well, hopefully we will have way more context for that, because when we saw that, I mean, it just went right over our heads.
That was such a weird one. And I remember, too... Because that was also, like, the time when, like, my lights didn't work. So we had, like, 5 lamps on in here. And so it was already just sort of a weird setting because we didn't have proper lighting. And then, on top of that, we just watched the most bizarre, confusing episode ever. So,
and even when people tried to explain it to us, it really made even less sense after that.
Yeah, honestly, like, if there are any episodes, recently or otherwise, that we have thought, oh, these aren't really that great or anything, none of them compare to Kinda. No. Because Kinda just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
That's just
at least to us.
Yeah, that was just a bad acid trip. As far as we could tell. So, but we'll get back to that someday.
At some point.
Months from now. But yeah. With all that being said, we're Alex and Dan from 7th Hour Films, and we will see you guys next time. Take care. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. There's a bunch of links on screen if you want to go click around any of those. There's a playlist for all of our Doctor Who classic reactions, as well as another playlist for all of my modern Doctor Who reactions if you want to go check those out. There's also a subscribe button and a Patreon button on screen, as well as other links in the description if you want to go check out any of those. See you guys later.